Hi there, homespun friends. It is Sherry. It is wonderful to see you today on this dreary, rainy day here in my little corner of the world. Not sure what it's doing where you are, but no matter what it's doing outside, when we can be together, it's all right by me. And so I wanted to come along today and share a little devotion with you. Now, some of you may wonder where I am when I'm filming these videos, and I'm actually in my front room. It's where I get the best outdoor light coming in, and I'm near my grandchildren's little play kitchen. And this is what it looks like. I'm going to turn the camera so you can see. And see, they've got their little pizzas and their little mixing bowls, and under this cabinet down here at the bottom, they've got all kinds of little pots and pans and things. I'm also sitting I'm sitting on their toy box, which is a chair. Let me see if I can show you that. Let me stand up. Here's the chair where I sit, and this is actually a toy box right here that has toys under there. So you can sort of see where I am. This is their little section where they come in. Now, I have another cabinet as well in another room, of course, where the grandchildren get out their little toys. They have blocks in there and Matchbox cars and things like that. I have 11 grandchildren, and they range in age from 18 months to 14 years old. And we also have, let me show you down here by the chair in case you guys decide you want to break open some toys. I have Mr. Potato Head and all his parts. I also have, let's see, another thing they play with is this little medical kit that we bought them. And inside they even have like, oh, we've got some bandages, and we've got a little medical kit. And look, we even have their little white lab coat. And we have some special doctor glasses that they might really need to have. This is the little picture that's with this. So these are some of the things that they play with. We also have Legos, puzzles, crayons. You know, when you have grandchildren, how that is. So this is where I am when I'm speaking to you. And I'm so happy that one day in the future, maybe, if my grandchildren ever look back on this day, that they'll think, well, there is my Mimi, and she's sitting with our toys, and she's talking about Jesus. I hope that's what they'll think. Today, as I was straightening up around my house, I walked past a bookcase, and I thought, man, that bookcase, I need to dust that off. And I started looking at what was on that bookcase, and the Lord just kind of spoke to my heart. And so what he shares with me in my practical everyday living, that's what I like to share with you. I came across these two jars. They sit on top of each other on one of my bookshelves behind me here. And in that top one is this. Now, you may be thinking, that looks like matchbooks there with, you know, little matches. No, it's not that. It's actually a sewing kit. Let me show you. Now, on the front of this is Doron Textiles and Crafted with Pride in the USA. But I'm going to hold it up closer so you can see it. It is a mending kit. And it's a little sewing kit that's inside of here. And these came from my maternal grandmother, who worked pretty much her entire life for the textile mill. And so did her husband, my grandfather. My grandfather died when I was maybe 12 years old. But he was working at the mill when he passed away. And so textiles, that was very big here in our section of North Carolina. And a lot of people had grandparents around here that worked in those mills, and many of those mills no longer exist, and this one doesn't. But I saw that, and it made me think about her because I inherited her sewing cabinet. And in that cabinet, which I use now sort of like a nightstand in one of our bedrooms, in the little drawer on that cabinet were these little mending kits. And then another thing that was in that little drawer were buttons. And I love buttons. And here's my little jar of buttons. But most of these came from my grandmother's. I think I've tossed in a few myself. But you know what I love about those days? They have long gone by because I don't know how much we're like this anymore. Maybe some of us are. But you know, when a garment was all used up and it could no longer be mended or passed down, it was just not, you know, it was stained and not useful. They would make rags out of it. They would cut squares off of it and make blankets. I mean, they tried to make use out of everything that they had. Nothing was wasted. And I love that principle because I believe that was the principle that Jesus lived by too. And so they would cut off the buttons. Like if you had an old sweater or skirt and it was torn up and it couldn't be fixed, couldn't be worn or used, they'd take the fabric from it that could be used and they'd save it. And then they'd cut the buttons off and they'd put them in jars. I thought I would show you a few of the buttons that are in here because I started looking through them when I passed that bookcase. And here's one, it's got an anchor on it. And I guess this was probably on some kind of a man's coat or something. And then here's this one. I thought this was awfully pretty. Wait a minute, where's my camera? There it is. I want to make sure I get right at the lens part so you can see what I'm holding up. Now this one, you can tell it's an acrylic button and it's very old. I can't tell if it's dingy or if it was meant to be yellow. What do you think? Maybe it was yellow. And then, let's see. Oh, here's one that still has a little bit of fabric or something to it there. And then a silver one that might, also have been like from a man's jacket or something. I don't know. Let me see what else. Oh, these are pretty. Let me show you these. Do you like buttons? Because I do. As you can tell, I'm really into them right now. I'm thinking they're so cool. I think about my grandmother's hands, touching these buttons, cutting them off of garments and putting them away to be used another time. There's a little, it's like a little fabric wrapped around a button. And here's one that's probably one on like an Easter sweater or something. You can see it's kind of knitted or something like that. Oh, here's a unique one. Look at this one. That's old, isn't it? Let's see. There's a red one. You didn't think you were going to be looking at buttons with me today, did you? That's cool. It's kind of like maybe it was on a sweater too because it's got that type of fabric on there. Is there any other? I mean, a lot of these are down in the bottom and so cool to look through. Man, I could look through them all the time. This is a pretty button. It's kind of like a pink. And it kind of has a unique little back to it. You can see really thin little back there where they would sew the buttons on. And I think about, my grandmother touching these buttons. And so I passed by this little jar of buttons. And these two sit together on the cabinet. And then I passed by this as well. And it's a little bottle that has two little coins in it. Let me take them out. These little coins my husband found for me at a local antique shop. And we are living in the town now where my grandparents lived when my parents were born. And my parents were born and raised here. And it is known for textiles and farming, agriculture, and Southern living, I guess, back in the day. And a lot of people lived in mill communities. They had mill houses and churches that were associated with that textile mill, schools that were also associated with it. And some of these mills would, back like in the in the teens or maybe 1920s, they would give out store tokens to the workers along with their paycheck. And they could take those tokens and use them at the mill store. And that is how We Have This Hope in the storyline, I talk some about the company store because that's the way that people were able to buy things then. In addition to having store tokens, they would also have transportation tokens where they could get on a bus or take like some type of little transportation vehicle that they had long ago in the 30s and 40s, and they would use those to go into town and to pick up goods that they needed then. Because as time began to change, vehicles began to advance, towns began to advance. They would move, from like the 20s and the company store. A lot of those closed down in the 30s and early 40s. They closed. People would go into the nearby town to buy things. And that's when these tokens were popular at that point in time. And they would use these tokens on public transportation. And there you go. These little tokens like this. And so my husband found me two of these from our town. It has our town name on them. And the man that works there was telling us about how the transit would work back in that day. I thought that was really cool. So I have these too. They remind me of my past. And then I have this that also reminds me of my past. It is a stick pin with a rose on it. Do you guys remember the days when women would wear stick pins? I mean, we wore some of these back like in the 70s, and I know that they had them long ago, long before that. But this sort of became something we don't see very much anymore, but I still occasionally will wear one. I have 3 of these. This one belonged to my paternal grandmother. She loved roses and she loved jewelry. She didn't wear a lot of gaudy jewelry. She liked just something like a necklace or a pin on her lapel that she'd wear little jackets and put the pin on. And she gave me this one long ago, and I've kept it all these years. I have worn it some. And she told me when she gave it to me, she says, one day you'll be wearing this and you're going to remember me. And kind of makes me feel nostalgic to think of her saying that, because I do think of her more than she realizes. I mean, or that she might have realized at the time that, hey, one day, you know, my granddaughter's going to think about me quite a bit. I also have a stick pin that was given to me that has an H on it. And H is my first initial of my last name. And one of my Sunday school members who was elderly, her maiden name started with an H. And that stick pin belonged to her mom. And she would wear it sometimes, even though she was married and her last name was not H for many years. She would just wear it because she said, it makes me think of my mom. I only saw her wearing it a couple of times, like Mother's Day one time. I think she wore it to Sunday school. But right before she passed, she gave me that stick pin. And she said, you know, this is really old. And I was trying to think, who can I give this H stick pin to? And she goes, the Lord brought your name to my mind. I want you to have it. And so I have worn that one too a few times. And so when I hold on to these treasures, whether it's a mending kit from a textile mill long ago, a jar of old buttons, some little tokens for transportation, or a stick pin that belonged to my grandmother, I think back and I realize that, you know, these people are no longer on earth. Both of my grandmothers passed in 2015. One of my grandmothers was 94, almost 95 years old. And the other grandmother was 87. So they lived wonderfully long lives, and I miss them a lot. And as I think of these belongings that they left on this earth, I start thinking about my own life. What are we going to leave behind? I know my husband does a lot of funerals, and somebody asked him at a funeral one time, said, hey, you know, I'm just wondering, I wonder what they left behind. I wonder what they left. And it was someone who had a lot of belongings, and they were just wondering, like, did they leave, you know, how did they have land we didn't know about or things we didn't know about? And he turned to them and said, they left everything. And that's what we leave behind, is everything, everything that we have. Friends, the main thing that we can leave behind to those we love the most is an example of our faith. Now, we can't transfer our salvation to someone else. We can't give our grandkids our salvation. They have to do that on their own. We can't give them our actual faith, because we've built our faith by walking with the Lord one day at a time through the trials that life has brought our way, learning to trust Him in difficulties, learning how to enjoy the good things. All of these steps that we take along life's road, they build our faith. And it's very hard to transfer that over to someone who's 14 or someone who's 8. You know, we can't do it. But we can lead by example, and we can verbally tell them about how our faith has grown and how important it is to trust in Jesus. This verse today goes right along with what I'm sharing with you. It's out of Deuteronomy 6, 5 through 7, and it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength. Now, this is a wonderful way to start our faith. It's difficult to share our faith or talk about our faith or lead by example if we aren't doing the things we need to do to start with, right? So the Bible tells us to start out by doing this. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and all your strength. This incorporates a lot of areas of our life. Well, it incorporates all the areas of our life. Our physical self, our internal self, our emotional self. These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts, which is the most precious part of ourselves, right? Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. So basically, the Bible is telling us, never stop talking about the Lord. Use every opportunity. Now, the Bible specifically mentions children here because the Lord is instructing these families to raise up their children, to talk about the Lord and to share with them and to convey your faith to them. But we can do that with others too who aren't our children. Perhaps it's with a neighbor. Perhaps it's with someone that we know in our community or we see every week, maybe a cashier at the grocery store. And just a kind word and maybe just the spoken word about the Lord can help. I know that I was in the store not long ago and a woman was saying what a tough time that she was having with an ailment that she had. And I said, I have rheumatoid arthritis. And back when my disease was very active, I had so many bad days. And the only thing I knew to do some days was just call out to the Lord, to say, Lord, help me, help me. And he did. And, she turned and she looked at me and she said, I'm a believer too. And I talk to Jesus all the time. And there was a cashier that was standing there and she was watching us. And I just wondered to myself what kind of impact our words had on her in that moment. Friends, wherever you go, you take your faith with you. And it's something that you can share and something that someone can hold on to remember you by. It might not be something tangible like this, but it's even better. It's something that they will always have in their heart and soul. It is wonderful to share a moment of time with you today, friends. And like always, I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.